Good morning again. My name is Noel Hacegaba. I serve as the Deputy Executive Director for Administration and Operations at the Port of Long Beach. And today I have the pleasure of serving as your Master of Ceremonies. So on behalf of the entire Port team, welcome to the 2019 Pulse of the Ports. Yes, you can clap. Clapping is allowed. Now, for those of you who are keeping count, this is our 15th annual look at how things are shaping up for the peak shipping season. It's hard to imagine it's been 15 years. A lot has changed since 2004, would you agree? In 2004, an 8,000 TEU vessel was considered really big. That's about the average size vessel calling San Pedro Bay today. In 2004, there were twice as many shipping lines as there are today. And in that year, there were no iPhones or Androids, but there were a bunch of Blackberries, remember those? Speaking of phones, we appreciate your cooperation in silencing them throughout the program. At this time, I'd like to have you join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may take your seats. Again this year, the Port is webcasting this event live at polb.com/pulseports. So at this time, I ask that you please join me in welcoming our national and international cyber audience that's tuning in right now. And those watching online can email your questions at pulse@polb.com, or you can tweet your questions using hashtag POLBPulse during the event. Now, as in past years, you'll find the video archived on our website later today for future reference. We have an exceptional lineup of speakers today. I'll be introducing them individually as they make their way up, but I'd like for all of you to join me in giving them all a big round of applause. Thank you. And at this time, I'd like to recognize our special guests who are with us today. Among us is Dwight Robinson, council member for the City of Lake Forest, and also a governing board member for the South Coast Air Quality Management District. And with us today, we also have several representatives from elected offices and agency partners joining us today in person or via live stream. Thank you all for being here. At this time, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, leading the Long Beach Board of Harbor Commissioners. Our current president is owner and founder of the Long Beach-based environmental law firm, the Egoscue Law Group, and previously served as a former Deputy Attorney General for the state of California. Representing the board, please join me in welcoming Harbor Commission President Tracy Egoscue.
Thank you, Noel. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. On behalf of the Board of Harbor Commissioners for the Port of Long Beach, we welcome you this morning, and we thank the Port staff, the entire team, and all the organizations that support this event. Thank you for joining us at the 15th Annual Pulse of the Port. It is also my great pleasure to acknowledge my colleagues. I'm joined by Vice President Bonnie Lowenthal, who is a former state assembly member for our area, a First District Council member, and Vice Mayor. I also am joined on the board by Board Secretary Frank Colonna, who is a real estate professional, a former 3rd District Council member, and Vice Mayor. We are clearly stacked by Vice Mayors, aren't we? Former ones. Commissioner Lorianne Guzman, who is the Assistant City Manager for the City of Huntington Beach and formerly Long Beach's Finance Director. And finally, Commissioner Luann Bynum, a former Long Beach City College executive who led their economic development program. Please join me in thanking the Board of Harbor Commissioners for their oversight and leadership of the Port of Long Beach. As a team, the board is dedicated to ensuring that the port does everything it can to recognize the needs of the customers, both locally and internationally. many of whom you will hear from today in this amazing program. According to a recently completed study commissioned by the port is doing more than its share to generate economic growth in our region. In fact, we support more than 50,000 jobs in Long Beach, 1 in every 5 local jobs in our city. And for every one of those jobs, there are another 50 nationwide tied to the activity at this port. In fact, many of the speakers come from all parts of our amazing country, and they are tied to what happens here in this gateway. In 2018, our labor partners and terminal operators moved 8.1 million TEUs across the docks, making it the best year in our 108-year history and breaking the previous record we set just a year earlier. We would not be able to do this without them. And I'd like to thank vessel and terminal operators, cargo owners, truckers, longshore workers, and all the other stakeholders at the Port of Long Beach. Many of these amazing people are in this room, and you will also hear from them, as I did last night over dinner. And let me tell you, these are amazing, thoughtful, compassionate, and dedicated professionals. This year, we are also returning to the waterfront next to a new City Hall building and port headquarters, and we are looking forward to welcoming you in the future at an event. We have an amazing view of our port. We are also almost finished with the replacement for our bridge. I hope that you have had a chance to see how much improvement and progress we've made at our waterfront. And finally, the new Long Beach Container Terminal at Middle Harbor is in its final phase of construction. While this large capital improvement portfolio is in progress, the board has also decided that we need to take on a massive improvement to our rail network. So stay tuned for that coming soon to a port near you. This morning, the board is very appreciative of this opportunity to hear from you all and from top experts in the supply chain. And we thank you for your time and attention. Please join me in welcoming our next speaker, our Executive Director, Cordero.
Thank you, Madam President, for that introduction. And again, thank you all for being here at the pulse of the port. As Dr. Hacegaba, and I'll join Dr. Hacegaba and President Egoscue in welcoming you all here. But as has been referenced, this is the 15th pulse of the port. It all started off as an idea of getting people together, and credit to Don Snyder, who thought, hey, let's get some people together and talk about some of our challenges and get some expertise, and we did it. And here we are 15 years later, and it's turned out to be a great event that people look forward to being here. Before I go further, let me recognize Audrey Kerr. Where is Audrey? Is Audrey here? She's back there working. So there she is, coming in front. All right, Audrey, wave your hand. Why I want to recognize Audrey is some of you may not realize that when you see this great environment and venue that's been put together, it's Audrey and her team that not only do this pulse of the port, but for state of the port. So I want to make sure we recognize her. So thank you so much, Audrey. Now, again, this is a great event. And what we're here now, gathering experts here that are going to comment further with regard to some of our challenges here. And not just challenges here at the nation's largest port complex, but challenges as gateways per se. Because a lot of times, as some of our experts are here agree, some of these challenges are discussed in at other gateways. But I'm very proud to say here at the Port of Long Beach, as President Egoscue has referenced, we've had a record-breaking year. This, by the way, is part of our mantra in terms of customer service. Customer service not only to our direct customers, indirect customers, but to stakeholders to keep them further informed and get your opinion and provide a venue such as this to, again, brainstorm some of the challenges that we have. And yes, we do have challenges. We have challenges as our competitors continue to improve our facilities. In my former position, I visited almost all of the top 20 gateways, container gateways in this nation. And I do recognize that they're all investing in infrastructure. and they're all trying to do their best to move cargo in the best interest of this nation. But none of these ports have invested the kind of money that President Egoscue made reference to, at the tune of $4 billion. And that doesn't include the additional $1 billion specifically for rail. And as many of you know, what we're trying to do here at the Port of Long Beach is amplify not only the rail component, but more specifically on-dock rail. Why? We want to move containers faster. We want to move containers in a more efficient manner, an environmental friendly manner. And those of you who are in this room agree that in terms of our inland port connectivity to the inland, to the areas such as the Ohio Valley, the Midwest, it is paramount that we do this. So we not only talk about it, we're investing our money into this venture. So with that, without further ado, I also want to thank the speakers, the experts who will be here before us to provide their expertise and discuss again some of the matters and issues that are at hand. But more importantly, I'm excited, along with the mandate that's being given to me by the Commission, to further not just advance customer service, but what's most important, advance operational excellence. Because at the end of the day, in this nation's largest port complex, this port is emphasizing a full court press to move forward towards operational excellence. So whether you're from the rail, marine terminals, carriers, we do appreciate you collaborating with us to make sure that we move forward and excel, because that's what the Port of Long Beach is about. So with that, thank you so much for being here, and I look forward to the commentary, the questions provided here by our experts. Thank you so much.
Thank you again, Mario and President Egoscue. I would like to take a moment now to recognize all of the exhibitors who joined us today. You saw them as you made your way to this room. Thank you for your support and for spreading the word to your membership. And I'd like to recognize them by name: the Gerald Disman Bridge Replacement Project, the Harbor Trucking Association, the Los Angeles Customs Brokers and Freight Forwarders Association, the Propeller Club, Women in International Trade, Los Angeles Chapter, and Women in International Trade, Orange County Chapter. And remember, attending the Pulse of the Port qualifies for credits with the National Customs Brokers and Forwarders Association of America Educational Institute. The event qualifies for 2 credits in the Certified Customs Specialist and Certified Specialist category. For more information, visit the Continuing Education page at www.ncbfaa.org. Our primary goal today is to help you better prepare for the peak season. And to set the stage, we begin by taking a look at the big picture. For this important task, we're pleased to have with us today Melissa Peralta, Senior Economist with TTX, who will start us off on our journey through the supply chain. Melissa's responsibilities include analyzing trends in freight rail shipments and creating demand forecasts for use in long-term capital planning. She also oversees the publication of the TTX Economic Monitor, a report that summarizes major trends in the economy and rail sector that's distributed to more than 1,000 individuals in the transportation sector. Melissa is a 2-time graduate of the University of Chicago, having earned her undergraduate degree with a double major in mathematics and economics, as well as an MBA. Please join me, ladies and gentlemen, in welcoming Melissa Peralta.
Hello. Well, thank you all so much for having me here today. I can already tell this is such a great event, and I'm so flattered, honestly, to have been included. I'm here to give you a real quick overview about where we see the economy and container imports going over the next year. To get there, I have to go through 2 slides fairly quickly. First is our standard disclosure. I'm sure you've all seen something like this. I'm just going to move on. The second is to tell you a little bit about TTX. Honestly, I'm mostly going to skip this slide too. I sincerely hope most of you have seen TTX equipment at the port or in rail yards across North America. We do own rail equipment. Our specific structure and the process by which those rail cars that we own get to the ports, get to shippers is a little bit complex. And so for brevity's sake, I'll skip it entirely. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me and I can explain a little bit more. But I'm going to move on to the economy. Looking ahead to 2019, it's really important to look back to 2018. GDP growth in 2018 was 2.9%, which is tied with the highest level in the post-recession era. 2018 was exceptional in that it was largely the result of the 2017 Tax and Jobs Act. So if you look at the chart I have here, I forget the colors were changed slightly. The more teal blue is the contribution to GDP growth from the government sector. If you take that out, and again, that is largely the impact of the 2017 Tax and Jobs Act, it would look like a pretty similar to any other year in the post-recession era. As we move into 2019, the impact from the Tax and Jobs Act is going to go away. And indeed, by the end of 2019, it could even have somewhat of a chilling effect on the economy. Present factors look fairly strong. It does seem like the underlying economic momentum will be enough to carry this stronger to moderate growth into the second half and even third quarter of the year. However, as that impact from the Tax and Jobs Act goes away, growth will start to slow. I would also say this chart is a little outdated. GDP growth in the first quarter of every year is always very volatile. There's a Chekhov saying, every happy family is happy in the same way, every unhappy family is different in a different way. To some extent, every winter is terrible in its own way. So first quarter GDP tends to be volatile. You add on the government shutdown from this year. My expectation is that when first quarter GDP is released, it will be a little bit weaker than what's shown here, but the underlying story is really the same. One real exception to the broad economic story is the housing industry. So housing sales did particularly poorly at the end of last year. There are a lot of reasons for this. One is higher interest rates, which means higher mortgage rates. Another is the decline in equity prices that happened at the end of last year that make affordability less so for many people. Higher input costs, just more difficult building construction conditions. But more than likely, this weakness will continue into 2019. At TTX, we do see housing starts rising into 2019, but at a fairly weak pace. Moreover, it's still, even with the modest growth, at a level that would be considered very, very, very low pre-recession. I bring this up specifically for this audience because so many inputs to housing come through the ports. Furniture, but also some building components. And at TTX, we don't see as strong of a relationship between housing starts and housing sales and these imports as some other people do, but there is still undeniably an impact, so I feel it was important to call out this specific market. So all in all, our forecast for 2019 GDP is below 2018 GDP. Again, because of the weakness in the first quarter, I would say it's more likely that 2019 will come in below 2.7 than above. But still, over the long run, it's consistent with the post-recession trend. I have here a summary of our major economic indicators. The only other thing I might call out is that, much like with housing starts, we see vehicle sales having another weak year in 2019. So this is our forecast for North American container import volume. It may come as a surprise, given what I said about the strength of the economy, that we foresee container import growth at only 1.8% in 2019. However, that's really tied to some of the timing issues we saw in late 2018. I'm sure many people in this room know, indeed many people in this room probably know better than I do, there was a huge wave of freight that arrived in ports across North America at the end of 2018. This has two impacts. One, by the time we get to late 2019, year-over-year comparisons will be very, very difficult. It is highly unlikely to imagine a scenario in which certainly December, but probably overall fourth quarter volumes are not negative due to these strong comparisons. But more so, this wave of freight that arrived at the end of 2018, we expect is a pull forward of freight. So this stronger fourth quarter import growth will result in weaker first and even potentially second quarter import growth. Of course, the cause of this surge in freight was anticipation about changing tariffs. The tariff situation, I would say, is still unresolved. To be honest with you, the delay in the tariffs last year was totally unexpected by me. I will admit to being essentially blindsided by that. So there's still a risk from container imports in this year from any change in tariff policy. But you can certainly see the impact of this wave of freight in various inventory levels. So this graph here is inventory sales ratios across various segments. There's been a huge uptick in wholesale inventories, and then you can really see the uptick in inventories in retail trade at the end of the year. So there are certainly just large stocks of container imports in the network waiting to work through their network, the network. And until that backlog is taken care of, it will likely depress container imports for the next couple of months. Now, I don't want to get too much into the other speakers' areas, their purview. But it is, I think, an interesting point that with container imports expected to grow fairly weakly in 2019, port choice becomes more of an issue than ever. Over the past couple of years, imports have just gained so much that essentially all ports could expect to benefit. But now that Greek growth has moderated, the port question becomes a bigger one. I'm not even going to go really in depth into the slide. I'm confident other people will talk about it. But one factor we have considered recently is IMO 2020. We do see some potential for this to help move freight back to the West Coast. Of course, many of the trends that have pushed freight to the East Coast are still in play. Still, at TTX, we think the all-water share, after having increased for several years, may start to flatten out in this year or into next year. So I'm actually really excited to see what other people have to say about this, since it is such a new issue and there's still so much uncertainty about it. But with that, that's our container import forecast, and that's the economic overview. And I'm happy to turn it over to the other speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Excellent job at capturing some of these macro factors. And if there was a headline to be written, I suppose it would say something like, "Wave of freight hangs in the balance," right? All eagerly waiting. Thank you so much. Well done. Our next supply chain segment shifts to exports. And for that, our speaker is Elena Asher. With over 22 years of international logistics experience, Elena is the Assistant Director of Export Logistics for Dairy Farmers of America, based in their new corporate location in Kansas City. DFA is a leading milk marketing cooperative and dairy food processor with over 13,000 farm members, 5,000 employees, and more than 40 plants throughout the U.S. DFA is actively pursuing international markets to promote U.S. dairy throughout the globe. Elena is a University of Missouri graduate with degrees in both Spanish and political science. She earned her MBA from the University of Phoenix in its St. Louis, Missouri campus. And I'm told she also has a knack for telling jokes about ducks. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Elena Asher.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate being here. It was a joke about cows, not nuts, so my joke for the day is, what do you call a cow that will not produce milk? So, it is a milk dud. So anyway, no, we're not supporting the nut milk right now. So anyway, I am thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. I do want to say again, my name is Elena Asher. I'm from Kansas City, Kansas, and we're just thrilled to be able to share about Dairy Farmers of America. So our mission statement, I will move on, here we go. So what we're trying to do, I'm not gonna read this to you, but what we're trying to do is we are trying to find a home for our dairy farmer member milk. And we're doing that through competitive markets and finding really a place for that milk. So we have over 40 manufacturing facilities in the US. And so what we try to do is the milk manufacturing facility that's closest to our member farmer, getting that milk into that facility and processing it into something that will add value back to the farmers and be feeding the US, but also getting it out. That's why exports are so important, because we do have a milk surplus right now. Here's a look at where our manufacturing plants are located. Specifically, a lot of times people ask me, hey, are you using reefers? How does that work? The product that we're primarily exporting right now is dry milk powder. So it's whole milk powder, non-fat dry milk, skim milk, milk protein concentrate, and we, interestingly, can use dry 40-foot standard containers or high cubes. So that's primarily the product we're moving out of the US. Right now is a really difficult time for our dairy farmer members because milk prices are very low. So interestingly, when milk prices are low, our farmers produce more milk. When milk prices are high, they produce more milk. We have a surplus of milk, okay? And that is why the export markets are so important, because we've got to get the milk dried and moved out to other countries that, one, need the product, and this can also add value back to our farmers. So they're very much hurting right now. Wanted to share about our lessons learned from 2018. So we very much decided that we needed to have a global strategy and not just a China strategy. Melissa talked about the tariffs, so we were ready to go. We were on board. We had some great Chinese contracts locked in. We were ready. We pretty much sold out our facilities for the year, and then the retaliatory tariffs came in, and midsummer, we were left with all the orders on hold, and then shortly after that, we had to cancel them off the books because it just didn't make sense for those customers to pay that additional duty. So they already were paying 10%, but when the retaliatory tariffs hit, it bumped it up to 30% or so just to import our dry powder milk. So it was cost prohibitive, and they're gonna go to other markets like New Zealand or Europe. So we decided that we need to pursue other markets and not just have that Chinese strategy. And with that being said, when all of this started to happen in the summer of 2018, we had to be communicating with our drayage providers, our ocean carriers, because everyone's like, Elena, what happened to the business? Where's the volume? What are we doing? And our salespeople had to go into scramble mode to start pursuing these other markets because we're up against the milk never stops. We have 2 harvests a day, and we have to dry it, and we have to turn it into something, and it's perishable. So we just have to find those markets. So the partnerships with our carriers, as I mentioned, very important. We realized even more so, we needed them to stick with us and understand what we were going through. So moving on, what we're focused on for 2019, we really started because we had to start focusing on it in 2018 due to the situation with the tariffs. So we were already going into Southeast Asia, and now we're just pursuing even more volume into Southeast Asia, which a lot of that goes out of the Port of Long Beach. We also wanted to get into the Middle East and North Africa, and this situation has really forced our hand to move forward with that sooner than we wanted to. The good news is that when China comes back on board, we'll already have developed these new markets, so that is good news. And then we were already in Colombia and Peru and Latin American countries. There's some very big advantages with the trade situation with Colombia and Peru specifically, so we're just trying to sell more into those areas. We are expecting growth because, again, our farmers are producing more than they ever have. They're very efficient, they're very innovative, technology's gotten better, so our member farmers are able to produce up to 30% more milk with the same amount of cows. In most types of businesses, you'd say that's great, but this is a cycle where we're getting more and we're just flooding the market with more milk. So we've got to find homes for that. With that, what can the Port of Long Beach do to help? So really, I know Mario talked about this as well. As an exporter, we're counting on you all to help us look good with our supply chain, to get the product into the terminal, get it staged up to get on the applicable vessel and get out. You know, we can't have booking splits. We have to be seen as a reliable exporter. We're competing against the Europeans, we're competing against the New Zealand folks, and we have to show the world that we have a supply that is reliable, that's consistent, that we're not gonna have bottlenecks. So I know Mario also mentioned the on-dock rail, so our stuff that comes out of the Midwest is coming into Long Beach. The on-dock rail is huge to make sure that product is getting efficiently moved and staged up, like I said, to get on the vessels. We also, you know, back in 2014, there was a lot of international just angst and concern about how reliable U.S. exporters were because of the situation with the slowdown. So we just encourage, you know, we want every chance we get for, you know, the PMA, the union workers, all the folks to understand that in these containers, we are trying to feed the world. It is a very noble cause, and we cannot let things get in the way of that, you know, we just have to make sure we're communicating, we're agreeable, we're working together the best we can to make the U.S. export ag area a reliable supply chain. And then the continued, I think it's great, all the wonderful things that the Port of Long Beach is already doing. And as a U.S. exporter, I would just challenge, we need all that and more. We need you all to not park on success, but continue to innovate, continue to find new opportunities to improve the flow. We're very excited about what you're already doing, and we need that and more. And again, the U.S. dairy farmers are counting on you all and counting on this supply chain to work. And there's a lot of folks in this room. I know some of my drayage providers are here. We use MSC. Alan's going to talk. Equipment situation, the port, the terminals. We need all of you to help make this a success. So with that, I am done. You have a cow on your desk, compliments of DFA. Okay, so don't fight over it, but someone gets it, right? And thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Elena. Well done. Elena, just to help us decide who's going to take the cow home, what's your birthday? Not the year, just the month and the day.
My birthday?
Yes.
It's August 15th, which is the same birthday as Ben Affleck. Same year, so if you want to Google that.
Yeah, told you she had a joke about a duck. So, whoever's birthday, in each table, whoever has a birthday closest to August 15th will take the cow home. How's that? All right. Well done. So, Elena, we heard you loud and clear. Operational excellence is a theme that we want to, okay, we'll let the distribution of the milk happen, all right? All right. Now that we settled who takes the cow home, we'll proceed. But in all seriousness, as Elena mentioned, you know, the need for ports, terminals, and everyone in the supply chain to come together to make exports successful is paramount to our success, which is why here at the Port of Long Beach, you've heard it from our board, you've heard it from our executive director, operational excellence is our key priority. So now it's time to switch our focus to imports with Benjamin Conwell, our next speaker. Ben is Senior Managing Director and Practice Leader for Cushman and Wakefield's e-commerce and electronic fulfillment specialty practice group for the Americas. His responsibilities include counsel on strategy, site selection, design, and execution for leading retail and logistics occupiers and investors, intellectual property presentation, and business development. As leader of the Special Practices Group, Ben provides clients the most up-to-date marketing leading counsel to effectively plan and execute their supply chain, fulfillment, and real estate strategies. Ben serves on the C&W Industrial and Logistics Services Leadership Team and its Executive Committee. He's also a senior certified supply chain professional and a member of the Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals. Ben holds an MBA from the Darden School at the University of Virginia, as well as a bachelor's degree from the University of Richmond. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Benjamin Conwell.
Hey, thanks very much. Good morning. Pleased to be here. I bring you greetings from Seattle, where not only is the weather not quite as nice as it is here, but the ports try everything they can do to stay competitive with what you have here. So it's fascinating for me to come and learn a lot about what you're doing here and the breakneck speed at which a lot of that change is happening. Two quick housekeeping items before I get into my remarks. The first is, I met a couple of remarkably impressive young people, high schoolers this morning, from the Logistics Academy. If you don't know the Logistics Academy, they are a remarkable group. So I'm sorry you guys are across the hall, but if you're listening, just give me a shout. Hey, good, good. Hey, thank you. This is way cooler than being in school, right? Okay, so grab these kids. They are remarkable. Number two, I work in the e-com space. We all know that that digital, that handheld, that mobile is just blowing up and is a significant share of what we all do e-com-wise. So, hey, I have a thick skin. If I look out and I see screens and you folks are on your phones and you're on your tablets, I'm cool with that because I know it's not because I'm deathly dull. I hope it's not because I'm deathly dull, but rather that you're stimulating the economy, that you're spending money. Okay, so in my remarks, I'm going to skim through at a very, very high level, bounce through a number of topics. I want to set a little bit of context about this ridiculously tight real estate market that you've got here, because, of course, everything that hits the wharf, hits the pier, is directly affected by what kind of availability or lack there is of distribution space. And then we're going to talk about some dynamics around e-commerce, most all of which ties directly with what everybody in the room does on a day-to-day basis. So with that, we think things are tough today. I want to put just a little bit of context. Might be a little difficult to see, so I've tried to highlight Inland Empire and Los Angeles. There is, in spite of tremendous development of distribution space in your market down here in Southern California, there continues to be little risk of overbuilding. On the contrary, we could all do with more space that was developed to create a little more flexibility and a little more flow. If you can see, historically, we've had peaks and valleys in this market, just as we've had in every other market. But if you look today, we have a tremendous amount of speculative space being built, especially in the Inland Empire, and to some degree in closer in LA. But net absorption continues to be pretty close. And in some submarkets, net absorption is greater than deliveries, okay? So the market's gonna get even tighter. Tight is the new normal. We all thought back in that go-go period of 2002 to 2007 that this is never gonna be as tight a market as we had then, right? It's never gonna be as constricted. It's never gonna be as expensive, right? Well, lo and behold, that's exactly what we've got now, and it's gotten even worse. So for the three submarkets that I highlighted here, the bar is vacancy as of Q4 of 18. And if you can see the little orange rectangle, that shows where the prior cycle was. We thought it was bad in 02, 07. You can see that in all three of these markets, it's markedly tighter. It's even more tight. And you can see some context looking at other leading markets across the country, how your market here compares, okay? Okay, with that, let's talk a little bit about e-commerce and some of the drivers that we track at Cushman and Wakefield. And so let me stop and give you a 15-second little blurb about us. One of the world's leading real estate services companies based in Chicago. And we work with many of the retailers. My practice group, we work with many of the online retailers who are bringing goods directly through the Port of Long Beach. Big names, some of the largest names in retail, down to a significant number of emerging companies, most of whom rely on Asia for imports. So my group and Cushman as a whole, we're deeply invested in what goes on here in the Port of Long Beach in terms of efficiency and speed. But let's drill down real quickly into e-com. At the bottom line here, the red line, if you will, it's very, very clear that total retail sales have been very predictable, very flat, and that is growing in the low to mid single digits year over year. The middle line here, the blue line, almost equally as predictable, growing, although at 4 and 5 times the rate, growing about 15% total online sales in the US. And then the top line is the one that has the most noise, the most variability, and that's Amazon's online sale growth rate year over year. It's clear Amazon continues to take a bigger share of a growing pie, but this is not a one company story by any means. Amazon, yes, but Walmart, Wayfair, Fanatics, Home Depot, Lowe's, even Macy's, Target, Best Buy, it is much more fragmented, it is much more spread around to multiple brands than it was just 5 years ago. Significant growth rates. On the right-hand side here, e-com is extremely important nationally to institutional and industrial real estate. We track it every year, trending at about 20%. Okay, so if 20% of industrial demand is growing at about 15-some-odd% nationally, you can see the problem that presents for availability of space. And in speakers later in the morning, you're going to hear some of the ramifications for that tightness. On the other side, on the left-hand side, it's what I call the retailer's dilemma, right? In this world of omni-channel, where retailers have got to deliver instantly, right? Amazon has taught us all to expect and demand of our retailers instant gratification, frictionless experience, and a free shipping experience, right? It means retailers are now confronting the issue of placing more inventory closer to significant population demand. Okay? Higher density means you got to get more inventory close so you can do next day, or you can do, in many cases, same day delivery. So we've had retailers for 15 years getting better and better and more efficient in driving sales for every dollar of inventory. Now we've got retailers who are having to confront this idea, I need to have more inventory in more places, and that's remarkably, it's significantly driven by the growing share of online in our retail world, okay? Real quickly, there are what I call 4 basic food groups in the online logistics space, and a lot of this tracks consistently in the non-e-com world, right? At the lower left-hand corner, the days of the very, very large fulfillment centers of 800, 900,000 square feet, 1 million square feet, those days are far from over. If you had room closer in, you'd see that more, but you see it out in the Inland Empire. Demand is virtually insatiable for that kind of product. Then we see this trend of more and more inventory, more and more distribution centers being moved closer to urban areas, smaller FCs that are 300,000 or 400,000 square feet. Next, tremendous increased demand for cross-dock, just plain old, what we used to call dumb cross-dock hubs. Tremendous demand for this product now from 3PLs, from retailers who are self-performing. And then lastly, customer service centers or last mile depots. Everybody likes to talk about last mile, and we haven't even begun to see the glory days of demand for that smaller product for last touch before it gets to the consumer. About peak. You see it probably in your businesses. We've seen a significant shift among our client retailers that peak is happening earlier and earlier and earlier every year. It used to be, we knew that those last 2 months of the year is when everybody shops and when all the sales are, and then you can backtrack from that. You can shift up the supply chain and predict when the wave hits the pier. But today, with essentially peak starting in about July, how early can it be? It's essentially, we see it smoothing out demand for imports for our customers. The demand is still there and it's still growing. It's just happening sooner. And in our case, we're seeing more and more that it's being smoothed out. So no question it's happening sooner. And then let me just close with a bounce through of a couple of key drivers. We see in our clients a tremendous growth in trying to be better in outbound consolidation, leaving China bound here. Can't tell you how many clients have come to us and say, we just can't continue to scale and grow efficiently. We see more and more clients taking more active role in their trans-Pacific shipping business, right? We're going to see more of that. I don't think there's any doubt. We see that demand, as I said, for distribution and fulfillment space is going to do nothing but continue to grow. And then lastly, everything that happens when the consumer changes his or her demands of a retailer, everything that happens at the showroom floor or the store floor, right? We all know in this room, it directly affects what happens in the supply chain. Never has it changed more rapidly, and never has the integration between retail and logistics been more integrated, been more close, and been more critical. So with that, look forward to answering questions when we move on to that section. But hey, thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Ben. Very well done. You know, just a quick stat on e-commerce, 22% of the world's population buys online. And by 2021, that number is expected to grow higher than 31%. And as you heard from Ben, e-commerce is driving the need for speed, not just in the last mile, but in the first mile and every mile in between. And that's why we've assembled the entire supply chain so that they can all comment on how they're adjusting their business models and their business plans to deliver that. So next we turn our attention to the ocean carrier, the next stop on our journey through the supply chain. And our speaker is no stranger to Pulse of the Ports. Alan Clifford is the Executive Vice President of Mediterranean Shipping Company, or MSC. He has been with MSC for over 37 years and has the distinction of being the company's first U.S. employee. MSC specializes in the transport of containerized cargo throughout the globe. In fact, MSC ranks as the second largest ocean carrier in the world. Earlier in his career, Alan joined a freight forwarding company with a focus on Middle East and German project cargoes. He was born and raised in New York City. He holds a bachelor's degree from the State University of New York at Buffalo. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Alan Clifford.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You can hear me, right? So you can tell from my accent, number one, I'm from New York. Right? Right? It's got to be an interactive thing or I'm going to get bored very quickly. Second thing is, I'm walking a little bit because from New York, you walk back and forth to avoid getting shot. So this is why I'm walking. I'm not standing behind the podium. A standing target usually gets shot. Kids, next room, take note of that. A couple of things I want to bring out. Elena, I'll carry the milk. Don't worry about it. I got plenty of containers. I'll take care of that. Number two, Ben, looking for a house in Laguna Beach. Maybe you can help me, because nobody will negotiate. I negotiate, they look at me, they move on. And third, nobody touch that damn cow on there, because I want to bring that back to New York. I want to prove that I was here. So, two important items. Two important speaking points. Naturally, if we want to speak about many different items when it comes to ocean transportation, we can be here for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. We have 8 minutes, and I want to show you a little video after this. So two top topics. Hold on 1 second. I do have to walk back over here. IMO was brought up by Melissa originally earlier. IMO 2020, starting January 2020. It's only a few months away. For people who know, people who don't know, countries that are signatories to the International Maritime Organization, vessels that are registered to those countries have to comply. Right now, the agreement is that you're at 3.5% sulfur in your bunker, in your fuel. Starting in January, that 3.5% goes to 0.5%. Doesn't sound like a lot, it's a lot. What is the process to get it out? A lot of work and a lot of money. Is there an expense? There's a huge expense. Who's going to pay for it? You're going to pay for it, because I'm tired of paying for it. I got to pay for college. I got to pay for the universities. I got to pay for the mortgages. I got to figure out how the heck I'm going to pay for that silly house in Laguna that my wife is breaking my horns about. So you're paying for the fuel, okay? That's number one. It's a significant situation. You saw on the slide earlier that it can be a certain number. I think you had in there about $200. I think it was about that. I think you're very conservative when it comes to that. I think that, well, look, you know, it is what it is. I don't drill oil. I move cargo I move Elena's cargo from point A to point B. Oil, when it goes up, you pay. When it goes down, you're in the clear. You don't pay. I don't really understand why. I don't understand why I have to subsidize oil. I got to subsidize terminals. I got to subsidize trucking and everything else. I'm trying to earn a living. You're trying to earn a living too. Who are you, the American Red Cross? You're not the American Red Cross. You're not a non-for-profit organization. You're here all to make money, because each of us deserve to earn a remunerable return on our investment. Don't you agree? Yes. Right? Yes. That's right. This is business. And in business, everyone deserves to earn a profit. Some profits are larger than others, and that depends on how good a salesman you are. I'm a really, really good salesman. So with this said, I want you to just take a quick look over here. This is a little bit how MSC is going to do the bunker recovery charge, which as it exists now, you will see it changing with many different carriers. I can't speak for the other carriers. They can do whatever they'd like. They can absorb it. Anything they want to do, I'm a happy guy. Because after 37, 38 years, I'm not changing steamship lines. I'm nearly finished. So this is how we're going to do it. You are going to see an increase when it comes to that. There aren't that many producers who are going to be producing low sulfur. Will there be enough low sulfur to carry all the vessels starting in January 2020? That's the question. And what happens if there isn't enough sulfur, enough fuel for sulfur? Will there be extensions? I can tell you, I know the IMO, there's no extensions. January 2020, that's the rule. So, if there's not enough fuel, what happens? Ships, do they have to get laid up? Possibly. What happens if ships get laid up? Maybe not enough space? Maybe not enough space. Folks, pay attention to these things. This is the kind of stuff that'll creep up on you. And all of a sudden, you're going to recognize that this is something you should have been speaking to your in-house people, your in-house businesses, months and years before. This isn't something you can discuss in the last 10 minutes. This is a very, very significant situation. Second thing is pioneering new information. You know, steamship lines are one of the companies, or the type of companies, that took a long time to become technologically advanced. I'm the first one to admit it. So one of the big things that are happening today, yes, no, maybe? Okay, good, smart. So MSC, as well as its partner CMA, is in business with the Traxens company, a French company, and you'll see that transponder on the outside of our container. We're in the process of putting transponders on all of our containers. These transponders are able to track containers all over the world, on the sea, on the land, everything. What does that mean for you? That means that for a fee, that's right, you gotta pay a fee, right? I'm not absorbing the fee. So, for a fee, you can track your containers. Now, if you have logs of lumber, if you have scrap metal, things like that, I don't know if you want to get into that when it comes to this. But if you're Estee Lauder or you have cosmetics, you got milk, which I really wanted to say the whole time, got milk. You know, if you got milk and things like this, then this could be very, very interesting. You're home, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, you can't sleep, you just had an argument, the kids are breaking your horns about something, you're sitting there, you don't know what to do, you say, I'm gonna go in the computer, I'm gonna see where the MSC container is. God willing, it's in the destination and area that you want, because that's what MSC does. We put things in the right area at the right time. We're an efficient steamship line. We're certainly one of the world's largest. We have, as of last night, 587 vessels, and we're multi-grouped. So we have tugs, we have terminal operation, which is TIL operations. Our people on the West Coast know that. And we have cruise. And we have a great cruise line, MSC Cruises. Has anybody ever cruised with us? Oh, I'm very happy to see that. Anyway, can't make any money off this crowd, I'll tell you that. But I tell you what I'm gonna do, because I have to keep with a time period, right? 58 seconds, I really gotta get moving here. So, we just christened another new MSC cruise ship, our 15th. It's called the MSC Bellissima. Does anybody know anybody know Italian? No? Nobody knows Italian here? Man, what a white bread group. Bellissima, right? It's beautiful, right? All of our ships, we have the Fantasia. Fantasia is fantasy, right? The Seaside, which means seaside, you know. And I was very honored. The Seaside was christened in the United States, in Miami, and I christened the MSC Seaside with our godmother, Sophia Loren. Thank you very much. And so I'm going to show you the MSC Bellissima. It's a 2.5-minute video. We just christened the ship in Southampton in the UK. Sophia Loren is there, God bless her. Not a 45-year-old person anymore. So you're going to enjoy this video, and thank you for listening to me.
gentlemen, that was such a nice, warm welcome to the MSC Cruises family. Bellissima, meaning beautiful.
And thank you, Southampton.
Good evening and welcome.
I don't know about you, but I feel like going on a cruise after watching that video. Alan, thank you again for your perspective and insight, truly one of a kind. What I like about Alan is he's always very clear, and he never leaves any doubt about what he thinks. I appreciate your perspective. The next stop in our journey throughout the supply chain is the MTO, or the Marine Terminal Operator. And providing this important perspective is Sal Ferrigno, Vice President of SSA Terminals. In this role, Sal has oversight for the development and marketing of container terminal operations in Washington State and California. Sal has more than 25 years of industry experience in terminal and stevedore management operations. He joined SSA in the early 1990s and has managed and operated several terminals in the West Coast in a variety of positions. And as part of his duties, Sal has been involved in various labor contracts and has extensive knowledge of West Coast labor work practices. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Sal Ferrigno.
Thank you very much, Noel. Appreciate that. Well, I had to follow Alan, and Alan, I have to say, you're a very tough act to follow. Good job there. You know, I want to talk a little bit about our future here in the port. You know, and it's specifically about volume growth and how I feel, or we feel, that we may be out of space in 4 or 5 years. But after listening to The Economist, I'm not so sure that I'm going to be correct, but I'm going to move on because I'm going to try to be optimistic about this. What I'm going to talk about, I want to note that this is not the port's perspective, this is SSA's perspective. As Noel mentioned, I've been in the industry for 27 years. I have been involved in many terminal acquisitions. Back in, I know Don and some of you remember, back in 2001, we acquired the Maersk terminal when they moved to LA. Shortly after that, we acquired the C60 terminal, which is another Long Beach terminal. Back then, we were operating Zim container lines at Pier J. We moved Zim to C60. Then we acquired Pier A, which is a 200-acre facility. We then moved Zim to Pier A, and Matson moved from LA to C60. You know, since then, other acquisitions we've had is in Oakland. Some of you may know the Oakland area, but there were 3 terminals. Our terminal, OICT, the Eagle Marine Terminal, TTI Terminal. Basically, one big terminal split in 3. Around 7 years ago, we started doing the work for APL, so we acquired their terminal. About 5 years ago, we did the same thing with TTI, and now we have one mega terminal in Oakland. In Seattle, there are also a lot of changes, which I don't want to bore you with, but we're doing some things there, which is very exciting for us, and we're going to have, basically a mega terminal in Seattle. So having said that, when we go into terminals, we use a certain number. And it's a very simple number. I myself have spoke to consultants because they may have a difference of opinion, but we use an annual container volume of 3,500 containers per acre. And that's based on a certain mode of operation, which I'll show you. On the West Coast, this is a typical mode of operation. Around 30% for on-dock rail. For us, for SSA, we try to do as much free flow as possible. And for you that are not familiar with free flow, what that is just a pile of containers, and when a truck comes in, they'll just take the first container on that pile. There's no digging or moving any containers. That process takes around 15 to 20 minutes to deliver a truck. It's really good turn time. We try to push that as much as we can in every area. Around 5% of imports are on wheels, but a lot of these are reefers and awkward cargoes. Around 55% of imports are in the RTG run, and that's rubber tire gantry crane. Now this is important for everyone to understand. This mode of operation is going to be our demise when we run out of space. It's basically random access. So a truck comes in the yard, we know what that truck wants when they hit the gate, and that container's the bottom container out of a stack of 4 or 5. And we need to obviously move the 4 or 5 containers to get that one container. That takes time. Our turn time for that process is about an hour. And that alone there bumps up the total turn time for the terminal. If we didn't have that, we can process trucks in 30 minutes. Empties, 100% are on the ground. Export, around 5% are left on wheels, and that's only because they're small bookings. When you have a small booking, you can't blow a big area in the yard just for 2 or 3 containers, so you're better off leaving them on wheels. And then the rest of the exports are grounded and stacked 5 high. 6 high when Don takes care of our current problem. So I talked about this a little bit. It's pretty simple math. You get 3,500 annual lifts, and you do times that by 200 acres, that's 700,000 acres. That's what we feel a terminal can handle to operate efficiently. It may not be perfect, but it's not going to be a bad operation. It's a rule of thumb that our company uses. Now we look at what I touched on earlier, is why I think we may run out of space at some point. In 2018, the Port of LA did around 9.1 million TEUs. And you convert that to units, it's around 5 million containers. In Long Beach, they did about 8 million TEUs, around 4.5 million containers. Then I took the total acre for every terminal in the port. This is including when LBCT is built out. I did include that extra 100 acres. So we have 3,046 acres in the port. In 2018, as I outlined, we did 9.5 million units. If we have a 2.5% growth, which we're hoping, I wanted to put 3, but I thought that's a little too aggressive. If we have a 2.5% growth, as you see, in 2022, we're at our limit. So that's when I think we're going to be in trouble unless we do something different. In my opinion, in our opinion, people are talking about not automation, let me backtrack, about these portal systems, transparency, which we're on board with. We did appointments back in 1998, so this isn't new to us. We're doing appointments today. I question how this transparency is going to help move cargo. We need to move cargo. We shouldn't worry too much about spending a lot of time and effort on these things that aren't really going to help turn times like free flow would. Free flow, need to figure out how to go back. So number one there is what I feel is what should be our primary objective. In Oakland, I have to say, does more than 3,500 containers per acre. And Oakland does that because they do over 2,000 containers every week in free flow. Truckers love it. You go there, these guys are in and out in 20 minutes. They figure out how to do it. We, as a company, we have one person that all that person does is goes around and talks to trucking companies, talks to BCOs, trying to promote free flow here in LA Long Beach. We're doing some, but we're not doing enough. The problem is the BCOs, they have their own truckers. They don't want to use another trucker. They can't, we're at the point now where if we really want to move forward, we need BCOs to work together, trucking companies to work together. We need to figure out a way so we can have piles of 100 containers in a pile. That way we can deliver them in peel off, and it's real quick. If we don't do that and we stick with this random access, again, we're gonna be in trouble. Off-dock container shuttling. We've been doing off-dock container shuffling for over 20 years. And what that is we move imports from the port to an off-dock place, and the BCO picks the container up off-dock. That there is a real viable solution because it works. We've been doing it for a long time. It helps terminal velocity. Truck drivers love it. People are calling us all the time wanting us to move their containers off dock so they don't have to spend time in the terminal. We need to look at that. When we run out of space, if you don't have space in the port, what do? You need to go outside and find space. And that's something, the marine terminal operators have a difficult time doing on their own. And I have to say the port has been helping us. But if we look at long term, this needs to be a solution for everybody, not just us. Automation. Many argue and many feel that automation is an option. We don't feel it is, and I'll tell you why. I can't disagree that automation will increase terminal capacity. That's a fact, it does. But I've traveled to many places and looked at automation, and to be quite honest, the owners look at us and say, look, I see all these people automating. Are we missing the boat here? You know, we're a private company. We're not owned by a big steamship line. We're a private American family company. And they ask, hey, we need to go look at this stuff. Maybe we're, you know, what are we missing? I've been in New Jersey. I've been, you know, to China. I've looked at, I think I've looked at it all. I haven't found one system that gives you anything better than a 20-year return on investment. And when you're a private company and you need to, you know, borrow money from banks, they think you're silly. You know, you can't get money and say, I got a 20-year return on an investment. So people that are doing it, I mean, Middle Harbor is a whole different deal. You know, I don't think anything like that will happen again. But now the companies that are doing it have to use their own money. And, you know, to us, again, my opinion, to us, it's not an option at this point. So in closing, as I mentioned, you know, number one, I think we need to look at free flow. And I keep looking at Don because he's the port, but he knows that we need, you know, help with that. And I think we have a committee put together that's going to try to push that a little bit. And again, that's number one. And number two is the off-dock land. You know, if we don't get this free flow thing going, we'll have no choice but to acquire more off-dock land because we're going to run out of space here. And that's it. I knew Robert needed a little more time, so I wanted to make mine a little bit shorter, so thanks.
Sal, that was just right and exceptional. Thank you so much for sharing the perspective and breaking down for the audience the key components that you look for as a terminal operator. You know, as Sal was describing their own projections in terms of cargo forecasts, let me remind you that the two ports in Southern California recently did a long-term cargo forecast. We're looking at 40 million TEU by the year 2040. So what Sal was saying is fully in alignment with the Port of Long Beach is pursuing. In order to accommodate that cargo in the years ahead, we need new operating paradigms. We need to adopt emerging technologies. And yes, we need coordination and alignment across the supply chain. So I just wanted to emphasize those points because those are things that the Port of Long Beach also embraces. So thanks again, Sal. Now we're going to hear about the key role that railroads play in the supply chain as they speed intermodal goods across the nation. And our speaker this morning is Hasan Hyder, who's the General Director of International Intermodal Sales for Union Pacific Railroad. Hasan is responsible for leading sales and business development functions for UP's International Intermodal segment within the Premium Business Unit. Since joining UP in 2002, Hasan has held a number of roles within the marketing and sales and operations departments, focusing on chemicals, grain products, and various industrial commodities, and also leading UP's marketing and sales talent development organization. Hasan received his bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from the University of Pittsburgh, as well as an MBA from the Carnegie Mellon Tepper School of Business. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Hasan Hyder.
Thank you, Noel. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. All right. I know we're towards the tail end here, but I feel the energy in the room. I am thrilled to be here and honored really to be up here with some great panelists. I've learned a lot myself this morning. I'm here to provide some perspective on what's happening from Union Pacific and in rail industry in general, and how essentially the rail portion of it is for the connectivity between the port terminals, which you've heard from, and also all the inland distribution centers and the rest of the supply chain, which ultimately comes back to all of us as consumers. Let's see. So up here, we saw some different interpretations of beauty. For any rail lovers in here, here's another interpretation of beauty. So this is actually just near the Great Salt Lake with the mountains in the background in Utah. So for all the appreciators of rail beauty, here's a rail beauty picture as well. So we're here in Southern California. You know, obviously, we talked about it earlier, the largest gateway for containerized import into North America. I've put up a chart here that shows all the major North American ports You can see Los Angeles, Long Beach down there in the bottom left-hand corner. And you'll see total TEU imports, and then you'll see some pie charts there that essentially show the portion of local freight, the portion of IPI freight or intact intermodal that goes in the original 40 or 20-foot container inland, and that's the blue portion. And then finally, the green portion of the pie, which is the portion that's transloaded into a domestic container of some sort and ultimately ends up inland as well. So if you look at this, and we're focused on Southern California specifically, we typically think of this market in thirds, and you can see why. Essentially, a third of it stays local, a third of it goes IPI intact, and then a third of it is ultimately transloaded. So what does the trend look like for the last 2+ years? So this chart now shows by week, by calendar week number, 2017 in red, 2018 in green, and then 2019 in blue, what the volume has looked like. So what do you see here? You see some nice growth from 2017 to 2018, and this is US West Coast eastbound intermodal volume trend. So you see the nice growth, 2018 over 2017, but really what catches your eyes is week 47 and beyond. That's what we've all been talking about to some degree already, is the pre-tariff surge. So from our perspective, that was a 37% increase, really over a 4-week time period that all of us in the supply chain had to deal with. And what did that surge create? It started with 30+ extra vessel loaders hitting the West Coast. That translated into some port terminal congestion. That translated into intermodal well car tightness around the systems. That translated into inland intermodal terminal congestion. That translated into chassis tightness inland. And ultimately, ended up at the warehouses as well in terms of filling that. And all around that, we had our drayage community feeling the tightness both on the West Coast as well as all the inland points as well. So what was happening from the railroad industry in 2018? If you look at it, within the industry, there was another wave of railroads, including my own, Union Pacific, that started undergoing the shift towards precision scheduled railroading, or PSR. So just a quick show of hands. Who's heard of precision scheduled railroading, or PSR? Okay, so we've probably got about maybe 20% of the room. So essentially, some of the word choices I heard earlier from Mario as well as Elena were focused on faster, more efficient, more consistency, more reliability. That's exactly what PSR and precision scheduled railroading is all about. From a Union Pacific perspective, we call it Unified Plan 2020, and it is focused on moving cars faster. It's on minimizing that car dwell at our inland terminals as well as on the West Coast. It is providing more consistency and reliability to that service. Ultimately, if we can do that more predictably, it pulls out resources in terms of crews and locomotives that we can now apply to more surge capability, just like we saw late last year. From a customer benefit perspective, it's what we've talked about: more predictable, reliable service. It's more consistent. So if people have faith in their supply chain, what does that do? They can carry less inventory. That translates into savings, and ultimately also reduces failure costs. If you think about the amount of air freight and last-minute expedited trucking that was taking place late last year, as you continue to have more consistency and reliability in the supply chain, that should take out some of those failure costs. So how has the industry performed over the last year? If you look at this chart here, this is the rail intermodal speed as reported by several US-based railroads to the American Association of Railroads, or AAR, and this is in miles per hour, and this is strictly intermodal speed. And you can see essentially from last March through just a couple weeks ago here, a couple trends. So probably the first trend you notice is from April of last year through roughly October, November, there was a deceleration in speed. And roughly that was about almost 3 miles an hour, or about 8%. So, I can't speak for the other railroads, but from a UP perspective, a few different things. It was probably some congestion on the West Coast, some congestion on some of our inland terminals, notably Chicago in particular. And Those things, typically, as they slow the network down, it creates a degrading factor. The other part you'll see, though, is you'll see a pickup from October through the end of the year. So at Union Pacific, that was our implementation of Unified Plan 2020. So that's exactly about the time period where we started implementing some of our objectives and some of our strategies around precision scheduled railroading. And you can see the speed picked back up. And if you recall from the prior chart, that was also during the time the volume was picking up. So fortunately, from a UP perspective, although there was still quite a bit of backlog, we were actually improving our service through that heavy demand time period. So then after that, you'll see essentially the new year came and then some degradation again. Unfortunately, and we're in some beautiful weather here, but it wasn't so beautiful in other parts of the country, particularly in the Midwest. I'll show you a couple pictures here. So if you look at the last 2 to 3 months, we've had some unusually cold weather, and particularly in parts of the Midwest. We had some record snowfall levels in different parts of the network, and then the rains came. And essentially, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and many of you probably heard about this or read about this in the press, you've seen pictures probably of the flooding that's taken place. Essentially, we had a fair amount of snow, we had some warm rains on top of it, and the two things together is what overwhelmed the systems. So the pictures in Nebraska and Iowa, those are literally within the last 2 weeks. So we still have 3 lines or subdivisions underwater that we're trying to recover and bring back out of service in those areas, and hope to do so fairly quickly here. And most of that's contained around the Omaha, Nebraska area. You know, a lot of people joke about the middle part of the country is flyover territory, but everybody here that's in supply chain knows exactly how critical that middle part of the country is. So we're focused on, like I said, on quickly resolving through the service issues. We've pulled in a lot of the surge resources. We've had locomotives in storage. We've pulled crews back from furlough. We're employing all those crews and locomotives to get your product back as quickly as we can. As we look forward to the balance of the year, and particularly as peak season continues, we are absolutely confident that we can get the service product back to where it was towards the tail end of last year, where you saw that speed pick up. And we're not going to be happy there. We actually want to go even further beyond that and provide the consistency and reliability that I was talking about. You know, Melissa talked about a lot of the signals here and some of the economic indicators, so I'm not going to touch on these. Obviously, from the various speakers you've heard, there's some mixed optimism here. But no matter what, I know all of my rail colleagues and myself are prepared for whatever growth comes this year and whatever challenges comes this year. You know, I've been in this business for 17 years, and every year is a little bit different. But we are going to be ready for your business and appreciate your time and perspective today. And I look forward to taking some of your questions a little bit later. Thank you.
Hasan, thank you so much. That was excellent. Appreciate the perspective from the rail side, which is a key partner for our supply chain. And going back to the earlier speaker about our ability as a port to be able to handle this additional cargo that we forecast, rail is going to be key. And our board has been very insistent that we continue our strategy to make sure that we can accommodate more on-dock rail and move more containers to those parts of the world that get a lot of snow while we get nice and sunny weather here in California. So our final stop on the journey, I know it's disappointing, we've reached the end here. But our final stop on the journey is Drayage with Robert Loya, who is Vice President of CMI West at CMI Transportation Company. As Vice President for CMI West, Robert directs and oversees all aspects of the Lomita and San Diego operations, ensuring that client cargo is moving in line with their expectations and in a cost-effective and productive manner, while developing and ensuring a work environment that is fair and ethical for all employees and contractors. As an industry leader, Robert serves as the president of the Harbor Trucking Association. He is also acting chair for the California Trucking Association Southern California Intermodal section. He's a graduate of the University of Denver, where he earned an executive master's degree in transportation management. He also attended the University of Southern California on a full football scholarship, earning a bachelor's degree in business administration with an emphasis in marketing. Now, incidentally, how many of you remember who USC played in the 1996 Rose Bowl game? Okay, if you don't know, our next speaker is going to tell you because he was part of that championship team. Ladies and gentlemen, Robert Loya.
Thank you, Noel. I appreciate it. We did play Northwestern, and we were fortunate enough to have a victory that day. So really quick, I got 10 minutes, and I was told I can't go over that. So I have a lot of stuff to cover. I'm very passionate, so if you guys get a little excited, we thought Alan was exciting. I'm definitely a little passionate about what we do. So Cal Cartage, really quick, just do what I'm going to cover as fast as I possibly can. Quick overview of the company. I'm not going to touch a lot on it in essence of time. We'll just kind of skip through that. If you have any questions afterwards, you can see me. We'll talk about the appointment systems. And we'll talk about a little bit about the state of the chassis in LA Long Beach, a little technology, and then we'll finish up with some regulatory stuff that all impacts all of us on a day-to-day basis. So real quick, talk about Cal Cartage. You may not know, we've been acquired by NFI Industries about a year and a half ago, which is another family company, privately held. They've been in business since 1932. We were in business since 1944. So these statistics here are basically Cal Cartage as a whole, not necessarily NFI. The next slide is basically the combined two, the service offerings that we provide across North America and in Canada. We also have a cross-border operation down in San Diego. So we operate both north and south of the border. Here's our service offerings really quick. We kind of break them up in 4 buckets: the transportation, distribution, global, and real estate. But enough of that. Let's go to this, which is near and dear to all of our hearts, right? So appointment systems. We implemented a pretty much appointment systems across the board, all 12 terminals. We went from a random access model to an appointment system, although some terminals did have appointment systems already in place. And the difference between what Sal was talking about and what I am defining here as a random access is that when you don't have an appointment, you can just show up when your container is available. Right? So that's the difference between what he's talking about on a PLO process, where you can just show up and you're going to have to start unstacking containers to get your container. The appointment system was advocated by the marine terminal operators. Back in 2014, and after the FAST Act was passed, they created the FMC innovation teams. And while we were there, you know what, we, the truckers, supported that initiative by the marine terminal operators. Why? Because they were going to provide consistent service. So we thought, right? And I'm very direct and I'm very honest, but I will also call it both ways. So when reality is 60% of the year, appointment systems are great, no issues, right? But we're really here to talk about the 40% of the year, the 35% of the year that really impacts us all from a cost perspective and our ability to service you, the customer. So that other 35% is where the pain points are, where the cost incurs. And so my entire presentation is really talked about what the pain points are and what we can do to fix it. So from our perspective, from the Harbor Trucking Association and the California Trucking Association perspective, we want appointment flexibility. We believe that the current appointment system is good, it's okay, but we can be better, right? And it's an evolution. We understand there was an evolution. We understand there's going to be pain points, right? The terminals have to do what they have to do to provide us consistent service. So we want same-day appointments. Can it always be possible? No, right? They got pre-order labor, so they know how many appointments are set per hour, per shift. But there's cancellations that occur every day, right? And you're going to hear all the terminals always talk about there's 30% missed appointments. But they don't tell you why, right? But I will, because at the end of the day, we can't control traffic. We live in a dynamic environment. We can't control where that empty returns. Alan, you know who does. So at the end of the day, we don't control those things. It creates triangulation where it creates inefficiencies. So we need same-day appointments. When we can't make an appointment, trucking companies have to cancel their appointments. We have to create that space for the other trucker, right? We got to get to a point where we're able to have smart appointment systems. Why? Well, because there's more integration, you're going to be able to optimize your fleet and be able to utilize that labor that the marine terminals ordered, right? So right now in this current environment, it's flawed. And there's a lot of accusations being made by the terminals and a lot of accusations being made by the trucking companies. Terminals don't offer enough appointments. Terminals, oh, well, you know, that's what happens, right? Well, what happens during peak? We get one opportunity to make an appointment. You didn't check availability the first day. It's BS, right? We are now told that we have to have this onerous process to check availability, which is completely unrealistic, right? They push the administrative costs and burden onto the motor carriers. anyways, we'll just move on. Dynamic, because I can go on forever. So dynamic and proactive predictive appointments, right? Right now is a pull system. We have to go in and query for appointments. Right? Do you understand when we start querying for appointments and it says unavailable, you know what we get back as a response from most marine terminals? Keep checking. Keep checking. When the appointment comes up, make an appointment. Keep checking. That's crazy, right? In this day and age, we should have a push system. When it becomes available, here's available appointments. Pick one, right? We have that technology all across different segments, right? But we need to do that. So in our opinion, we need to start getting to a more proactive, dynamic type appointment systems. Multi-terminal universal appointment systems. In our opinion, I understand, Sal, and your perspective, and I respect that, but we need to get to a single portal where I can do business for all 12 terminals in one location. It's absurd that I have to go to 4 or 5 different terminal websites just to do business. It's inefficient and it's non-productive. So why can't we get there, right? Why? Because there's competing interests, and I'll talk a little bit about that in my technology slide. So at the end of the day, if we don't fix this, if we don't continue evolving the appointment system, this is where we're going. If you guys don't understand the port of Butana and Vancouver, there's regulatory actions in place to penalize both the trucker and the marine terminals for poor service, missed appointments. Do we need to go there? Doesn't mean we don't need to understand it, and perhaps maybe take some lessons learned from those 2 port complexes to make sure that we don't get in that same situation. We need to continue to evolve. State of the chassis. Well, we all know what happened here late in the 4th quarter, right? I don't need to explain it. I think everybody's done a really good job. But the pull, it helped us out of 2014 and 15. Definitely got us out of a rut. But that also needs to evolve. We need to get past that. We need to get to a situation where we're true interoperable, gray pool, right? When you have dedicated pools within the pool of pools, right, where they're not part of, but they're still within the supply chain here, we have to now be directed to take a container from one terminal, take that chassis back to the other terminal where those chassis belong, non-compensated. Who wants to do work for free? Not you, right? So, my point exactly. So this is what happens when you have a situation when you have competing operating systems or competing interests going on, right? And then we're not even talking about the private fleet. The pool of pool, when it first came out about 4 or 5 years ago, whatever that was, 82,000 chassis. Now, if you talk to the 3 IEPs, they're going to tell you that, hey, we right-sized. We don't know what the private fleet is. We don't know that size. It's down to 68,000 chassis. 68,000 chassis from 82 when we just had record-breaking year volumes. And we wonder why, right? Well, I'm not going to cast any more stones, but I will. What creates customers to hold on to cargo? Ocean contracts that allow these MTOs or these BCOs to sit on containers for 30 days. Well, what's going to happen? Naturally, the dwell is going to go up, right? Well, we turn the boxes. We can't. We can't return the boxes because you guys have allowed that. And you've also included those in the ocean contracts. A couple years back, we were asked to, hey, Maersk took the lead on that, and they divested themselves of chassis. So guess what the truckers did when they started acquiring chassis, whether either purchase or lease, long-term lease, right? Then a few years back came, and then we started having to regress. Some of the same customers that initially said we can use their chassis, we can use our own private chassis, now said I got them back in my ocean contract. I'm stuck holding the bag, right? So I honestly believe we need to go to a gray pool, completely gray pool, and off dock, right? Give the marine terminals back their space. We'll move on to the next slide real quick. Technology, port-wide portal, I kind of talked about it, but what the future is for this port and the supply chain is interconnectivity. Direct connectivity and machine-to-machine transparency. Transparency is where we need to be, right? We have always considered this port complex, it doesn't matter what gateway you're at, is the black hole. Once it hits the terminals, God only knows where that box is, and then all of a sudden it pops out, right? It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And the trucking community has been the dinosaurs of the supply chain for years. For years, we're no longer the supply chain inhibitor here when it comes to technology. We're integrating. We have relationships with just about most terminals who are willing to integrate direct from an API perspective. That means my TMS system, my transportation management system that I manage my pickups and deliveries is directly connected to the terminal operating system. And why is that beneficial? Absolutely. Gate transactions, appointments, pre-arrival, right? That's been negotiated for, then let's use it. Minimize any potential trouble tickets that could potentially happen at the in-gate and let the truck through. create some more efficiencies. We talk about free flow, it's great, but it's only part of the answer. It's not the entire answer. And quite frankly, Pure Pass, I know it's not up here and I had it as a slide, missed the boat. The trucking community offered up the Pure Pass to give the BCOs, the large BCOs, the opportunity to have exemption on the second shift if they do free flows. That was Pure Pass and Wickham Toad said no. But that's a great incentive. If you want to incentivize free flow, why not? Why not give those big BCOs who have the wherewithal to have the volume to actually do a free flow at night, work with their origin, work with the steamship line, and meet this goal that we're trying to accomplish. But anyways, another story. Regulatory, where we're headed. Right now, I can tell you for a fact, because I sit on the IIEC committee. For those who don't know what the IIEC committee is essentially IANA and the UIA. The UIA is the interchange agreement that we all have to sign, and we're signatory to in order to move equipment as truckers, as railroads, and as equipment providers, which are mostly the steamship guys. There is such a thing as called the UIA, and within the UIA, we have certain rules that we have to abide by. Guess what happens if a trucker doesn't adhere to it? His interchange is canceled. So guess what? We're forced, we're dictated to pay whatever that is. There is a process, and I will tell you, this called the DRP, that unfortunately the motor carriers are not educated on. But as an association, both the CTA and HTA, we are taking the lead on that and actually sitting with IANA and having an educational series so we, the trucker, are informed, well informed of what our rights are under the UIA. It's not only a one-way street here. So does it need to be modernized? Absolutely. To some degree, absolutely. The new operating environment doesn't take into account where we're at with that UIA. And not all provisions, there's certain provisions, specifically equipment use. If you're a motor carrier and there's an agreement in place that says by 1600 today, I know where to go take that box tomorrow, and it's tomorrow now, and I'm driving, I know where I'm taking this box, shut out, reroute it, dual transactions only, no single. Are you kidding me? How am I supposed to plan? Those costs, who's absorbing those costs? We are. Customer doesn't want to get paid. Now that puts me in the middle between my BCO from a commercial decision to charge that customer because he decided or she decided to use that steamship line, that equipment provider. It's an unfair situation. So we are addressing that in the IIEC committee. Hopefully there'll be some revisions down the line. It's a tall hurdle to ask, but we'll get there, in our opinion. And then the FMC, the emergent detention. I was very fortunate enough to be nominated, part of that D&D detention. And just so everybody's aware, there's a reason why we're having this. Because as a fair practice, port practice coalition that we joined, we felt that the emergent detention practices in per diem, in our opinion, we're how can I put this very gently? We're being abused. We were being abused. And so obviously the FMC felt that there was some merit to it because they created these D&D teams. So next week, we're headed to Washington. We're going to talk. We have four things to fix. Will it happen? I have no idea. Every time I've gone over there, it's a lot of rhetoric about protecting their own interests, et cetera. But we're going to put our best foot forward and see where we can come up with an equitable solution. That's all we want, is just a fair process. We don't want to be the winners all the time. We don't want to be the losers. We just want it to be fair and equitable across the board. So that's why FF28 is in place. It's short of a regulatory action mandate, but it could lead there, right? Same thing with the port terminal tariffs. And I don't mean to throw any bad dirt on the ports, but it's not reflective of the current environment. These tariffs were written back in the day when it was random access. We are now an appointment system. We are restricted in how many times we can come pick up a box. We are restricted when we can return a box. So why aren't the tariffs reflective of that, right? The terminal tariffs say we can pick up, you have import box laden, full laden boxes, 4 days, 8 shifts for all intents and purposes. Appointments, I'm down to 1 to 2 shifts. And if I miss one, you missed it, trucker, why'd you miss it? Not paid to merge because the next appointment is after free time. So I can go on, but I just wanted to kind of give you a high-level overview of the things we're doing as a motor carrier to protect the best interests of the BCO at the end of the day. So I appreciate it for the opportunity. Thanks, Noel.
Robert, thank you so much. Love the passion, love the USC tie. And I think we can say this of every speaker today. They've been very clear. They've been very candid with the pain points that they're all experiencing, pain points that they hear about from their own customers. And this is what this program's all about. It's not just to report and update, but also to have a a conversation about how we can address these pain points together, because I think what you've heard from all the speakers is that it's going to take the entire supply chain coming together to address them. So again, I want to thank all of the speakers. Please join me in giving them all a big hand for a great job. And now it's time to answer your questions. Please come to the microphones located on the aisles to ask your questions so that we can hear you. Please identify yourself, your affiliation. Let us know if yours is a general question or if you'd like to direct your question to Alan Clifford, for instance, or a particular speaker. We'll also be answering the questions you sent on social media. We're very pleased to have with us today Bill Mangaluso, who's no stranger to Pulse and no stranger to our industry. He'll be moderating the Q&A. He's a respected journalist and a familiar face to most of you. He's a senior editor of the Journal of Commerce here in Long Beach, where he covers container shipping, harbor trucking, intermodal rail, and U.S. Customs. Bill began his career in 1972 with the New Orleans Times-Picayune. He joined the Journal of Commerce in 1980 in New Orleans and has worked for the JOC in New York and in Long Beach. He's a native of Chicago and has a bachelor's degree in journalism from the University of Missouri and a master's degree in history from the University of New Orleans. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Bill Mangaluso and all of our speakers up here to the front.
Thank you, Noel. While the speakers are coming up, I just want to say the Journal of Commerce thanks the Port of Long Beach for inviting us back for Pulse of the Ports. It's the major event for the port, and we consider it our second most important event after our Trans-Pacific Maritime Conference here in Long Beach every March. We have a bit of an emergency. Alan Clifford has to catch a plane to New York, which is no big deal, but he's got to get there. Who knows what the 405 is like right now. So I'm going to ask Alan a question, and then Alan will respectfully get off the stage here. So Alan, okay, you spoke very much about the low sulfur fuel requirement that takes effect on January 1st. When will the shippers, your customers, begin to see the low sulfur fuel bunker surcharge reflected in their contracts? And secondly, do you anticipate it will be like a 1 month floating surcharge, or will it change every quarter?
Thanks, Bill. Contracts are being done right now, especially on the Trans-Pacific, but all over the world, but especially on the Trans-Pacific, especially eastbound from Asia to the United States, both for NVOCC as well as BCO shippers. Contracts will not specify the physical amount, yet there will be clauses in there that will notate the IMO 2020 rules and regulations, and the decisions will be made as we get closer, probably toward the fourth quarter of this year, on what that figure will be. That number can, if anybody remembers one of the slides that I put up, that number will include not only the size of the vessel, it will include the trade route, will include the types of cargo that are on there, and there's a lot of different figures that go into the numbers that are going to be shown that. Let me just make a quick note of this, folks. There's two different things. Number one, fuel has gone up precipitously in the last couple of months as well as last year's. Please do me a favor. Don't tell me that you went to the local Exxon or Mobil station and gas went down. Got nothing to do with this. Has nothing to do with that. Gas also went down in the state of New Jersey because of our taxes. So two different things one thing has nothing to do with another. There's two different things. One is the carriers are going to keep on increasing bunker as bunker is increased to them. Because remember what I said, that we're not in the oil business, we're in the transportation business. And the second thing is the IMO 2020, which will take effect in January of 2020. And so in the fourth quarter of this year, more carriers, and again, I can't speak for the other carriers, but with MSC it'll become clearer and clearer on what that number per container will be. So it's not a one-time figure, it's a per container figure. I hope I answered your question. If I didn't,
Yeah, no, you did fine, Alan. So thank you for your presentation. Thank you for
I'm going to get out. Thank you very much.
As always, thank you. Okay, let's get back on rotation here, Melissa. You talked about probably a relatively slow first quarter, second quarter maybe also. Does that mean that we should see the volumes in a return to a normal peak season where, you know, August, September, October, that's where we'll really see growth? And if so, you know, considering that it was a very early peak last year, what kind of increase are you looking for peak season 2019?
A lot of it depends on trade policy. So my fear is that we could have another cycle where freight gets pulled forward and that we could have an extremely early peak this year. It's interesting, if you do a statistical analysis of the numbers, it's hard to say what a normal year is. It's hard to point to a normal year. It seems like this early peak year, that's been a trend for the past 5 years. And last year, it actually seemed to be a little bit later than the previous 3 years. In some years, I can point to a real concern about capacity, pushing freight earlier. And so I think that may have been a contributing factor to why peak seemed to be a little bit more what people would be considered normal last year. I would expect it to be an earlier peak this year, excluding any tariff issues. Unfortunately, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head right now, and I would rather just honestly admit to that than make a guess and give anyone the wrong impression. But the real issues, I think, will probably be in the fourth quarter, and that'll just be because of the very difficult comparisons.
Okay, thanks, Melissa. Elena, you talked about your members, and I think you also were kind of inadvertently referring to other ag exporters who have to find different markets now because of the tariff situation with China. What happens to the supply chain when you are used to shipping a lot of your product from certain interior locations through certain West Coast ports to China, and all of a sudden now the markets may shift to Southeast Asia or to Africa or the Middle East? What are the supply chain challenges first in the U.S. supply chain, and then secondly, what do you encounter when you go to some of these countries that are not used to having the big vessels and the frequent service that China is?
No, that's a really good question, because we're getting when we had the Chinese business, obviously there's a lot of direct sailings from the West Coast, and so the transits are quick, and you know, the rates are great for us. And then when we had to shift like mid-2018, it was just very challenging because we had to really hurry, scurry, go out and get rates, add rates to our contracts. And then these were places we weren't going, not at that level, and other ag exporters were doing the same thing. So we ended up just different places of Southeast Asia just are not built yet for that kind of a shift. And so we saw significant transshipment delays. So maybe we could get out of the US, but once they got to one of the transshipment points, they were, you know, a week or 10 days before they could get on the feeder vessel over to the final destination. And meanwhile, you know, we're trying to push to get this new business, and then we have these long transits because those countries just aren't equipped for that kind of shift. And then, of course, with going into the Middle East and North Africa, I mean, those are just more complicated routes than just going straight from the West Coast to places in China. So there's been a lot of learnings, and we've really had to partner up very closely with our ocean carriers, our drayage carriers, so that we are keeping them up to speed on what our sales group is pursuing, so they can be ready and on board, you know, whether it's helping us get new rates filed to our contract, just setting up new routes, all of that. It's been a struggle for sure. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Elena. Ben, what we just went through since last summer was very unusual because of the tariffs and the front loading of the shipments, whatever. But from your perspective, did it expose an inherent weakness in the distribution facilities in Southern California, and maybe an inherent capacity shortage, which you can't always build the church for Easter Sunday, but if you don't, you're not going to handle the cargo. So what's the situation in that space?
Yeah, in terms of the secular challenge, peel the tariff business off. That's just gas on top of an already pretty fiercely burning fire. Just a secular basis, we see these historically tight vacancies. We see these historically high rental rates. And sometimes rental premiums don't even cut it. And that is, if the space does not exist, if the vacancy does not exist, paying a few bits of a spiff higher in terms of rent is not going to magically make it exist. So in our work in Southern California, it is just maddening for our clients. Our landlord clients love it because they can enjoy these remarkable tight vacancies. But for our occupier clients, our retailers, our distribution clients, it is just a disaster. It means having to go way up into the high desert. It means hitting all the way over to Phoenix and having to really think way, way, way outside the geographic box. And then you layer on top of that this exo shock of tariffs in anticipation, and it's been just a terrible combination, a horrific combination, unless you're a landlord.
Okay, thanks, Ben. Sal, I think your point was well taken that the ports do not have an endless supply of land. We will run out of capacity maybe sooner rather than later. Now, peel-off does work, but how are we going to get shippers, truckers, the warehouse operators, et cetera, to work together to pool their cargo so you can get your minimum 100 containers per peel-off pile?
Well, that's a good question, Bill, and I wish I knew the answer. Like I said before, we've been trying, but they just can't do it. I have a good friend that's a BCO, and I asked him directly. He ships reefers. I've known him for 30 years, and I said, would you let another trucker move your box? And he looked at me and he said, F no. So that tells you the story.
Yeah, it does.
They trust their trucker, and they, until that changes, we're just going to have to, deal with what we have.
I guess the market may force those type of changes.
Yeah, so, possibly.
We'll see. Hasan, this was a question that Ken gave me from the audience. What we just discussed with the low sulfur fuel, and possibly this might actually be advantageous for the West Coast ports because the journey from Asia to the West Coast burns a lot less fuel than the journey to the East Coast. So given that, is it incumbent upon the railroads, the Western railroads, to maybe be prepared for a larger growth in cargo than you calculated without even considering the impact of the low sulfur fuel on shipping patterns in the Trans-Pacific?
So that is a great question. I actually leave tomorrow for an 8-day Asia trip where I'm going to meet with all the large ocean carriers over 5 countries in 8 days. That is one of the questions I need to understand myself. I think certainly if you look at the economics of it and what was presented earlier by some of the panelists, it certainly indicates that that is a possibility. And certainly, to your point, Bill, the West Coast railroads and Western railroads would benefit from that. So we have a pretty tight forecasting process. We usually start the year looking at macro trends, but then ultimately we try to dial those in at a customer and geographic specific level basis. And then we get feeds in from some different ocean carriers and their perspective of what's actually leaving Asia and coming to the West Coast. So we have our planning horizon goes anywhere from 12 to 18 months out to literally this week and next week. So we're going to, part of my purpose of this trip is to really understand some of those impacts that you're talking about with IMO and what the lower sulfur fuel changes will be, and to see how we need to prepare from a rail industry perspective and specifically UP perspective to handle that come January 2020, because that'll be here quick.
Okay, very, very well put. Thank you, Hasan. Okay, Robert, now you talked about the return of empties, and I don't know if maybe everybody doesn't know, but it often happens, probably too often, that a trucker is prepared to go to the terminal to pick up an inbound load, and of course wants to bring an empty container with him or her to return the empty, and all of a sudden there's a notice which actually starts with the shipping line, and Alan got out before I could grill him on this. But no, you can't, we're not accepting empties at such and such a terminal. To me, it seems like this problem's going to get worse with the alliances, because you have vessels that are conceivably in the same alliance calling at 4 different marine terminals, spread out over LA and Long Beach. So what is the Harbor Trucking Association, what is your industry doing to modify how you operate in this era of alliances, because they're not going away?
Well, first and foremost, we're going to address it from a UIA perspective. There's a mechanism in the UIA that holds the equipment providers accountable and their agents. Not necessarily the agents in terms of, because they're not signatory, but the equipment providers are essentially going to get slapped in the hand until they stop doing this. And in order for the motor carriers to understand that, they got to understand the process and what the process is, and that's why we're educating the motor carriers on how to handle that when it does occur. We are reporting these issues to the UIA, and the equipment providers are being put on notice. That's step one. Obviously, there's a multi-pronged approach here. Step two is, if we know we are going to get shut out, and certain companies in our motor carriers within our association are not picking up that box. We're just simply not going to pick it up. Here's a notice, customer, I'm not picking up your empty. You need to deal with the steamship line who is telling us we can't return it, right? And so then we have to then figure out, does free time stop? Now, the clock on that chassis doesn't, right? Unless it's my chassis. But the cost is still, the cost is going to be bared by the customer. So there's a multi-pronged approach, Bill. We're hoping that perhaps through automation and learning of machine to machine, we have these virtual inventories at our customers' locations where we can actually start better optimizing our runs back to the port. As we become more and more integrated with the terminals, more and more integrated with perhaps with a single portal, we can actually start seeing some efficiencies in that manner that we currently don't see it right now. We rely heavily on our dispatchers to know all this information in their head. And if you're a big carrier, then you have multiple trucks, maybe 40 drivers under your purview, and for you to remember whether a terminal is shutting you out, whether a steamship line has changed destination, whether there's a single transaction at this terminal or a dual transaction at that terminal, it's a lot of information to process, stuff that a computer with algorithms can do right now. And so that's where we're headed as an industry.
Very good, Robert. Noel, a question. That clock keeps going up and down. So how much time do we have left? 15. Okay. Okay. Thanks. Now, I don't know if anybody. No, I don't see anybody at the. So I'll just keep asking questions, Robert. Since we have you here, and then actually, Sal, maybe everybody wants to jump in on this one. The pool of pools and whatever. But the big elephant in the room regarding chassis is the carriers who said they got out of owning chassis, 7, 8 years ago, are still very much in the business by designating which chassis from which provider can go for which moves. Is that something that can be raised with UIIA where you say, listen, this is messing up the entire operation? My trucker shows up at a terminal with a chassis and the terminal says, no, we can't accept that chassis, we need it from another provider. How are we going to really get to the root of this problem?
Unfortunately, the 3 big IEPs are not signatory to the UIA. That means they operate in their own world by their own rules. So unfortunately, we can't dictate anything from the UIA, which kind of seems silly if you think about it, We have this document that handles all the intermodal, all the players, the stakeholders that of the equipment itself. You have the wheels that are essentially not even part of that agreement. Makes absolutely no sense. Now, I'm not putting pressure on the three. Maybe I am. Maybe they should join the UIA. Maybe there should be a DRP process, and perhaps maybe there should be some changes to the language that can address these issues. But right now, there isn't. So we're at the mercy of essentially the terminals. And at times, certain times of the year, we won't even be allowed to return that chassis back to that terminal. We're told to take that chassis elsewhere. We send an email to the pool groups. Guess what they say? Well, turn it back to this terminal. Who's going to pay me? You speak to the BCO. Are you kidding me? Right?
Yeah. Okay, I think we know where Robert stands on this issue.
Yeah.
Hasan, now you cited certain metrics in your presentation as far as container dwell time, train speed, et cetera. Where are we right now? I don't know if you want to speak for BNSF, you probably don't, but where is the rail situation in LA Long Beach right now with those metrics? Are we where they should be, or do we have a ways to go?
So we don't measure the rail speed on a local basis. I did look at the number this morning for UP. It was 27.3 miles an hour on the intermodal network last week. And if you look at where we were late last year, which was somewhere in 30 to 32 mile an hour range, that's a good starting point where we need to get back to. So that's where our efforts are for the next several weeks and couple of months here, is how do we get back to that, and then ultimately we want to go beyond that. Specifically here in LA Long Beach, I think we've worked through a lot of the pre-tariff surge, the last few terminals that I think had some type of backlog. We've been working closely with them to ensure that from a rail car supply perspective, they had adequate rail car supply. So really that backlog worked off probably a few weeks ago. So, post-Lunar New Year, we're feeling pretty good about being current. With unfortunately some of the flooding incidents, the middle part of our network was cut off, which really isolated Chicago and LA for a period of time. So that's what we're really focused on restoring this week and next coming weeks.
Okay, thanks, Hasan. The question from the audience for anybody in the panel or the entire panel, it involves trucking, but the industry talks all the time about the aging truck driver force. You're talking, folks in their 50s who've been doing this their whole career, and they probably tell their sons and daughters, you can do anything you want, I'll pay for your college education as long as you don't become a truck driver. So how are we going to attract more truck drivers to the industry, and especially since we're talking drayage here, to the drayage industry? I don't know, I guess we should start with Robert.
Sure, why not? Well, attrition's going to happen. And right now there's about 17,000 trucks in the PDTR. When Pier Pass 2.0 comes in, or I'm sorry, the Clean Air Action Plan 2.0 comes into effect, that thing's going to go back down to about 8,500. Frequent callers in the port is about 8,000. Right? As volumes continue to peak, if we have these congestions like we've had, we're going to have serious backlog in the terminal. How do we attract? Well, honestly, part of the ATA, which association we are part of, are advocating for 18-year-olds to actually drive trucks. We can send them across the country to go kill people, but we can't let them drive a truck, right? Interstate commerce, right? So we're talking about that. So we have to get these kids who do not want to go to a secondary education. We want to get them early on, because by the time they get to us, it's about 23, 24, and they've already probably had a bad experience in the industry, maybe a trade that they've done, and they don't have a good experience at all. And typically, intermodal is not the place they come. They're going to go over the road, they're going to go LTL, they're going to go regional. Unfortunately, we have a bad stick because the turn times and the abuse that our drivers have stated that they have received when they're coming in and out of the ports. So it's a problem that it's only going to progressively get worse. We need to attract younger, make it very, from a compensation perspective, we've got to be very attractive so they can earn a good living, because most kids, let's face it, millennials, they're just going to rather be on a computer and earning $150,000 behind a computer screen versus driving and making $150K. I wouldn't do it.
Very well put. And Sal, I think Robert was alluding to this. We hear all the time now that since the trucking companies have more pricing power, more leverage, that they are looking for the customer of choice, the BCO of choice. Well, I think Robert's indicating that if you're not the terminal of choice, truckers aren't going to want to come to your facility if they can go somewhere else and get quicker turn times. So, how are the terminal operators responding to the truckers to make sure that you can get them in and out of your gates as efficiently as possible?
Well, we're continuing, we continue to look at a lot of different things. For example, I explained earlier our RTG run, that's the most inefficient mode of operation that I could think of. And our RTGs have computer screens in them. So when a truck hits the gate, the container lights up. And if the driver sees that, the container's highlighted, they won't bury that container. If they're in that row, they'll leave it on top. So it's more efficient. And companies are doing pre-arrival. I mean, we're constantly looking at things to improve efficiencies.
Okay, thanks.
Bill, could I add something real quick?
Yes.
Because I was not short of an opinion here. I'm part of the UIA, and as we all are, the IANA has a task force that I co-lead that is essentially looking at the optimal driver's experience at an intermodal facility. So this task force is new. We are going to be addressing what that optimal experience is. And so we'll be looking for stakeholders who want to participate, including marine terminal operators, railroads, truckers, BCOs. So as you stated, we want to have the optimal experience. And so what is that? And so we're going to be investigating that and putting out a white paper to hopefully, for those who want to take some best practices from it, they can implement some of those things. So we'll be looking at it across the board.
Perfect. We have time for one more question, and
Bill,
thank you.
Bill,
and we have a
Bill,
questioner.
Bill, can I add something?
Yes.
This whole thing with getting drivers to, or getting people to want to drive trucks, this isn't only a trucking problem. We have mechanic jobs, good jobs, that we can't find people to do. Yeah. The younger generation wants to go work for Google. They want to, and they can offer a lot more. So it's not restricted to trucking. I think we're painting the picture that trucking's such a bad job that nobody wants it. That's not the fact. I know truck drivers that make $100,000 a year. Yeah. Okay? And I don't think Robert can dispute that. There's people that make damn good money. So it's not that the marine terminal operators are so inefficient that everyone's suffering. It's a new day and age. People don't want to do these types of jobs, drive trucks, mechanics. Like I said, we're having a hell of a time finding mechanics because of this. We're finding people that are a little bit older, but the younger generation, they don't want to, no offense, they don't want to get their hands dirty.
Right. No,
including my own kids.
You're right. No, I think all of society is adjusting to that problem. You're right.
That's why it's even more remarkable for those kids across the hall who are recognizing, hey, I can be smart in this field and I can start as a high school kid so that I can grow into a meaningful job in logistics, whether it's driving or some other skill.
Mm-hmm. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm going to jump in before somebody else asks another question about the question. Okay, so hi, Phil Ramsdale, Transport Solutions, and I'm also chair of the advisory board at Cal State Long Beach on supply chain. And so actually you jumped in at the end there to kind of something I wanted to address. So there's a workforce development component to this where mechanics and all these programs where people can get training that's not a 4-year degree or master's involvement, and there's a lot of programs going on at Long Beach City College and many other places. They're doing a great job of that, and we all need to support that. But my question is about the collegiate and the management level of this. So Cal State Long Beach has about 180 people involved in their operations and supply chain management program that have declared that as a major. Does anybody hazard a guess how many came in declaring that major? I'll give you a hint, it's less than 5, right? So there's a tremendous awareness problem here in the colleges, and the Port of Long Beach has supported a program at Cabrillo High School You know, we're doing a lot of things, trying to do some things to raise the awareness. But my question is to the group, how can we raise awareness, and are you willing to support maybe getting in this information into the high schools and the colleges about what a great career this really is? So my question is, who would be interested in supporting that, and how can you do that? Support the awareness of high school kids to get into the supply chain industry.
I'll start real quick.
There we go.
From a Union Pacific perspective, we've done quite a bit of work at the college level. We've actively recruited at college level for a variety of functions for many years. So I think we've developed those relationships, and we have a core set of schools across the country that we go to regularly. You bring up a great question about high school. I think we're just starting to address some of those items, but I know our workforce resources group would absolutely love an opportunity to talk to maybe yourself or anybody else that's interested in that to figure that out, because you're right. Once they come to college, it may already be too late in some cases. So how do we engage them earlier in the process?
And I think that's, it's almost a community by community basis. So we maybe will see an awareness of the need for workers, management type trainees in the shipping, trucking industries, because it's so busy here with that, and then, like what Hasan is saying, that through UP, they see a need for rail, where they are. And so a lot of it comes from the industry locally. So we really are running out of time. If we have one quick question with one quick answer, we can handle you.
It's more of a kind of comment, but last week I was actually part of a career day at Santa Ana High School. Just so happens I've been in this industry for nearly 20 years, and my wife's an assistant principal there. And she proceeded, after 16 years, she decided that I actually have a career in shipping. So these kids in high school have no idea how their cornflakes get on their table, the milk, any of that. So I went, put together my slideshow, and we went through things. I can tell you, if you want to get people that are truckers and that are want to get involved, you're not going to be looking for them at the high school or at the college level. You need to look at the high school level, right? So we need to, this program, the first thing I jotted down was this Logistics Academy. Fantastic. We have, at my wife's school, they have a legal academy, they have a speech and debate and all these different things. No one has any idea how things get to their table. So we really need to try and get some of those, be able to get those kids to understand what the trucking, how much do I make? That's what all of them asked. How can I make money? But they also need to understand what it's like to work hard. And not all of them are going to be able to get a job at Google, I can assure you that. So.
Right, very, very, very well taken. And once again, it seems like it starts at the local level. And as you said, it starts early in the high schools. So we're fortunate here. We have such a program in San Pedro. So it's up to all of you to bring the message home to your hometowns. Listen, we could go on forever. Unfortunately, we can't. So let's thank everybody.
And again, thank you to all of our panelists for such an exceptional delivery and conversation. And as Bill said, we wish we had more time, but you certainly optimized and maximized it. Also want to give a shout out to all who contributed to make this 15th annual Pulse of the Ports a great success. And I know earlier Audrey Kerr was recognized. I also want to recognize all of our exceptional port team members, Business Development Division, Communications Division in particular. Thank you so much. Great job. And a couple quick final reminders. One is, please take a moment to take the survey, the Pulse of the Port survey. It will be emailed to you to the same address that you used to RSVP, or you can go to our website, polb.com/Pulse survey. And finally, if you have not gotten your parking validated, as you make your way out, please make sure you get that validated so that you have no issues on your way out. So folks, this wraps up Pulse of the Ports 2019. Thank you again so much for joining us, making this successful. See you again in 2020.